Hello there, this is Sohail Hasni, your host at Energypreneurs. Cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. Thank you for joining. Long time. It's hard to believe that we used to study together 40 plus. I mean, maybe even more.
1980.
Yes, 1984, scary. But I think one of the reasons I asked you to join this podcast, although it's not the core technical climate focus that other my guests are, but you have an amazing journey that I think will inspire anybody starting from civil engineering, mechanical engineering. Last time spoke, we were talking about cancer research, biomedical, and now you're looking at longevity. It's an amazing inspiration. Maybe if you could introduce yourself, and then we see what can we learn from you, Tahir.
Sure. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity and good to see you. We studied civil engineering together, as you remember, right? I went to do my master's in civil engineering in Washington State and then went to Cornell to do a PhD. That's where I started to do more theoretical and applied mechanics. After PhD, I started to look for a job. So I keep applying and there's no job. And after that, I started to look for a postdoc. The department head in electrical engineering, he asked me to go and talk to him. So I went to talk to him. He was a department head, physicist, electrical engineer. And I was leaving his office and he called me back and said, I know you didn't understand anything I talked to you. But remember, opportunity knocks only once. I'm giving an opportunity. That's the only part I understood. The next day I went back and I said, yeah, I thought I understood what you said. It's what? I said, you're giving me an opportunity. How much are you going to pay me if I go for a postdoc? And he said, $20,000 a year. I realized that is the same as the PhD students make. I said, I will take it. And then he said, well, I was not going to pay you $20,000 a year because that violates the state law. I would have to pay you $24,000 a year. That was just to test that how committed are you. So I started working there, experimental nanotechnology for 4 years in electrical engineering. Then I started to look for teaching positions. I came to Illinois, where I am since 1997. At that time, I had a good mentor who was not at Illinois, and he told me the future is in biology, in the human health sector. And so that stuck in my head. So I was hardcore engineer, mechanical engineering, which I have never studied before. So I was being surprised at why did they hire me to teach mechanical engineering. So I used to go and read the books to teach undergraduate students. So I was learning with them. Very stressful. But then one day, somebody came to my office. It was like after 3-4 years when I'm here. And he said, I'm an embryologist. He implants embryos for in vitro fertilization. It's a process where many women who cannot get pregnant go through this process of in vitro fertilization, which has about 25-30% success rate. And he said, maybe if you can test an embryo to see which one might be successful.
From an engineering perspective.
So here's this idea that the embryo that are more mechanically compliant, more softer. So if you could test an embryo, maybe they will be successful. The one that has become more hard, maybe they're not successful. They look the same. So they used to take the embryo and look under the microscope. They all look the same. But then they have to make a decision which one to implant. Right? He said, I cannot tell good or bad, but maybe another test would be helpful, maybe mechanical test. So I was doing nanotechnology. So I started to make some sensors to test them. It took me 6 months because I was not familiar with them. And he would send me mouse embryos. And so we spent 6 months, and then no matter what embryo I test, they're the same. Good, bad, dead, alive, doesn't matter. So I used to tell him, send me some really bad ones that you think is really bad, and send someone that you think is really good. If needed, you kill them, and then send it to me. So he was doing those tests. I cannot find any difference. And he said, really? I killed them. You don't know? I said, no, I don't know. They're the same. His name is Matt Wheeler. I said, Matt, I don't want to see you anymore. I wasted my time, lots of money went down the drain. Just before I was finishing it, I started to read biology. And by that time, I began to know some people. And one was Professor Donald Engelberg at Harvard Medical School, top-notch biologist in Children's Hospital. But he was not seeing patient. He's a more hardcore scientist. And I sent him an email saying, I did these things and I see no difference. I thought he's a big professor. Why would he respond to me? But he responded with a short email. And his email was, you need to pluck the right string. And he explained that what we were testing was the shell of the embryo, not the cell inside the embryo. The biologist I was working with didn't think of these two layers. He didn't think that we should remove the shell to test the cell inside. He said, now you come to my lab. We spent 3-4 days. And then he started to tell me how to start the biology lab. He basically handheld me through buying things that I need to do biology work. So, Donald Engelberg is still there. He is the director of the Wyss Institute at Harvard. It's a very famous place. We still keep in touch once in a while. But that was my journey from civil engineering to applied math to mechanical engineering, all by chance, all by luck. There's nothing to take credit for. It's just luck.
I always like the definition of luck. Basically, luck means when preparedness meets an opportunity. If you're prepared all the time, that's when you get lucky. Some people don't act, you acted. You wrote that email, you took an offer, and you become lucky. So I like that definition where preparedness meets an opportunity. You have to be at all times.
At that time when Matt came about embryology, I knew one of my relatives. She was going through in vitro fertilization. And in the US, you pay $10,000 each time. Insurance doesn't cover. When the woman fails, it's tremendously emotionally difficult because they are already under the impression from society that they cannot bear children. They go through in vitro fertilization, they paid $10,000, but then they fail. And it's a psychological trauma. And so I was seeing this woman and I thought, if I can do something. So it's like a real motivation that if this can be solved. Two things happen at the same time, right? What I know now is that testing mechanically the embryos has become standard for in vitro fertilization. University of Minnesota came up with a way using microchannels, and they flow the embryos through the channels, and the ones that can go through narrow channels, so they can deform easily and go through. That's how they split. As far as I know, some of the embryologists use those systems. It's a quick check.
Nano scale, right?
Scale. They like half the cross section of human hair. Imagine the human hair is about 100 microns. It's about, I would say, 30 microns, 1/3. So if the embryos can push them through, they have the right compliance. In civil engineering, we used to study consistency in cement, right? The right amount of water or sand mixture. If it's too dry, it doesn't work.
Optimal point. Yeah.
That's right. It's very easy. So they float the embryos and then they go multiple channels. The one that could survive the narrow channels are the ones that you take out. These are all patented technologies. That's what I was told. And it's one of the things that people still use it.
Last time I saw in your lab that you were fighting cancer cells.
Yeah. After we failed the embryo work, I never went back. At that time, I did not think that you take the shell out and look at the cell itself. I thought nobody implants it this way, right? So I thought, what's the point? So I didn't go back. I'm still a very good friend with Matt. But as my dad passed away with pancreatic cancer, he went to my house so many times until he passed away. From the college third year or so, when he was diagnosed, I thought if I could do something. After I got into biology and built up my lab, that's when I thought that maybe we should do something in cancer, the real challenge. Pancreatic cancer is one of the hardest. There's only 5% survive. What happens in cancer is that most cancer, including pancreatic cancer, when the tumor forms, it becomes very stiff compared to normal tissue. So the pancreas is very soft, but then the pancreatic tumor inside the pancreas becomes very stiff. So the question is that stiffness, hardness playing a role in cancer progression? So that was how we started. I used to talk to oncologists in local hospital. I couldn't get into the pancreatic cancer right away. I thought there should be something a bit easier to get in. So I started to work with physicians here on colorectal cancer, the colon cancer. If colon cancer starts, it's a bad disease if it gets in the advanced stage, if it gets metastatic state. So what people do, they do colonoscopy and they find out, oh, there is a tumor, right? They decide to take out part of the colon, which has the tumor, and then they stitch back the colon. And so I used to go and take out part of the tumor. They have to do the histopathology, but I take the part of the tumor while the cells are still alive. So what happens is the physicians take out the tissue. So they have a solution where they put it so all the cells are killed, very quick time frame, but they preserve all the proteins they have. So then the pathologist takes slices of the tumor to see whether the cancer cells are limited within the tumor or have gone to lymph nodes. That's how the staging is done. How big is the size, how much they have gone into the muscle, and so on. So that happens by killing them, so that a snapshot. And then they slice them and take an observation. We wanted to take out the living cells before they are killed. So we used to go and take those cells and then study what happens in the cancer cells and other cells in the tumor. It turned out that the cancer cells rely on other normal cells. They're called fibroblasts, and they tend to help the cancer cells. I call them slave cells. They become slaves to the cancer cells. So they produce things that the cancer cells need. So it takes a long time for the cancer before it becomes metastatic, before it begins to become dangerous. So during this time when the cancer progresses, so these slave cells help the cancer cells to grow progressively. But the slave cells have this very unique property. They are like strong mechanical actuators. They pull everything around them like a rubber band. Imagine you have a tennis ball, and the tennis ball is made of cancer cells. But then you wrap the tennis ball with a taut rubber band. So rubber band feels very hard. Tautness, the tension in the rubber band, is what the cancer cells need to grow. The stiffness, the hardness that we see is a direct consequence of the slave cells becoming crazy in terms of they're just very mechanically very active. So what do you do with it? Chemotherapy is used worldwide, but the amount of chemotherapy you need to kill the cancer cells is hard to reach.
Targeting is very difficult, right?
Very difficult. So the tissue is so dense, so compacted by the slave cells. The blood vessels that are going inside the tumor have to carry the drug into the cancer cell. But it is so compacted that the drugs cannot reach the cancer cells as much as it is needed. But the same drugs are attacking the rest of the body. So you cannot go high enough that it could kill the cancer cells because the rest of the body is being affected. And you cannot reach high enough dosage, one, because they're not as reachable, because all the slave cells are pulling everything to make it so compact, right? They call it cold tumor microenvironment. It's very cold, dark. It's a symbolic analysis. So the idea is, can you make those slave cells less talkative to the cancer cells? Of course, you have to use chemotherapy, but can you increase the efficiency of the chemotherapy by making these slave cells less active, less actuating? That's where we come in. The idea is to use cocktail drugs where you don't use only chemotherapy, but use something else that could relax the slave cells. And can you turn off the crosstalk as if they're always talking to each other using a cell phone. Can you turn off that communication? It is like a war, right? If you go in the battlefield and somebody's telling them the intelligence, then you turn off the communication. So then you cannot win the war as much. I've taken 25 patients, cells are in my lab, and now we're working with MD Anderson, which is a cancer center in Houston. Now we're focused entirely on pancreatic cancer, back to what I wanted to do in the beginning. So if someone is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, essentially it's a death sentence.
Steve Jobs
So
had the same pancreatic.
that's right. And that tells you he is one of the richest person in the world, got the best possible care, but they couldn't fight it. You saw my father. You saw painful it is. It's very difficult, the family, for the patient. So if something can be done, whatever, it could be a small benefit could help. We are making those tumors in the lab directly. So imagine somebody gets this tumor and there's a biopsy. You take the biopsy out and you identify that, yes, this is cancer. Now you have living cells from the biopsy. So you get the cancer cells, you get the slave cells, and the other cells that are in the tumor. We reproduce that tumor on a petri dish. We make many of them. From a biopsy, you get millions of cells. So you can make many clone tumors on a dish. We use sensors because we want to measure the forcing, the actuation. Like you were standing on a weighing machine, right? So we have sensors that how active are those type of cells are. So if you make 1,000 of them, small tumors, now you can test drugs of all kinds. So as if like you reproduce the same human tumor 1,000 times, right? And then you have many drug choices, options. You can try them, take 7 days, and see which one has been more effective in turning off the slave cells, turning off the communication, and kill as many cancer cells as possible. So it's like more individualized. Medicine has so far been one glove fitting all. There's one protocol, one chemotherapy drug or a cluster of chemotherapy drug. But it's like no matter whether it doesn't matter, they're applying it.
It's a carpet.
Coming for everybody.
Is AI helping you already or not?
AI is helping in many ways because the patient data about pancreatic cancer or any other cancer is huge. So the hospitals have the cancer data, the hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And what drug was more effective, what was in their blood, what tests were done, what proteins were expressed. So those background data is there. How it is helping when we make those tumors on those in the dish, right, 1,000 of them, and we can continuously check how they are progressing, what kind of proteins are being expressed, and then you can also match with the data which AI filters through many patients and see how close is it to the broad database that one can have.
And this hunt is all at a sort of micro scale, right?
Correct. A little bigger. So the sensors are maybe a millimeter size, maybe 2 millimeter size, but the tumor themselves are about maybe 0.5 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter, maximum 1 millimeter. So you can think of 1 millimeter cube. So you can see by naked eye, barely, but they have your microscopes, of course. And you can see the cells moving, how they're becoming invasive, what protein they're expressing, while the patient may be gone home and you're monitoring what might be happening inside.
So this is what Peter Attia calls medicine 2.0 now.
Yeah, that's right.
It's about medicine 3.0, how to do prevention. I think you were talking about longevity and prevention also.
Yes, we are all getting old, right? So we've been thinking about of disease. Cancer is one of them. But there are other diseases like dementia, depression, Alzheimer's disease. Which one is better if someone having a pancreatic cancer and suffer for a year and then die versus the one who has this dementia, depression, Alzheimer's disease and gradually not knowing people and going to depressions and living for 20 years, which is good? I don't know. Very hard to say, right? Miserable, both are miserable. So I started to think about how things can be improved, right? If you are in the Western world, like you in Australia, myself in the US, the health disparity is very large. Those who are rich, they have lot more healthcare than those who are poor, even in the US. And then if you think about Bangladesh, Africa, big part of Middle East, they're just relying on prayers to a big extent. But if you look at the longevity of lifespan, what is surprising is that after the Industrial Revolution, 1850s, 1860s, the lifespan in the Western world has been increasing steadily, like linear slope. So to give an idea, in the US, my numbers may not be exact, but I'm throwing some numbers. It's about, in the US, probably about 50s, before 1850s. And now it's about 76, 77. Since then, it was linearly increasing. So my hand shows the slope. Think about here, 1850s, and now 2004, 5. It's linearly increasing. No sign of plateauing. It's continuously increasing. Anyone can check on WHO data. Now, if you look at Bangladesh, India, China, Africa, that line, which I started in 1850s, has just shifted by about 80 years. So all the developing countries were lagging behind by about 60, 70 years, and then they picked up. The slope is the same. So in Bangladesh now, I think lifespan is about 72. About 70 years ago, it was like 45. We are all living longer, which is good. Cholera or infectious diseases, we can fight them. We have reduced child mortality significantly. But if you think about other animals, cats, dogs, right? They're not living longer. Their lifespan is not increasing, but we are living longer. So what does it mean? We have beat the evolution by maybe 10,000 years. Because if we were to live that long, we'd have to go through evolutionary process. So in a species like us, Homo sapiens, cannot change their lifespan from 40 to 75 in 150 years. It should have taken maybe 10,000 years through the selection process, right? Those who live longer, that generation would create next generation, many generations. But we are living longer because we are preventing death artificially, which is good. But here is the bad news. When we cross 50, our brain begins to shrink. That's an evolutionary call because we have not survived the 10,000 years of evolutionary process. We are living longer by artificial means, right? After the age of 50, the brain starts to shrink by about 1.5% volume per year. There's a consequence. So the critical part of the brain is called hippocampus. It's deep inside the brain. That's part of the brain is related to memory, learning, decision making, and many other critical things. By default, that's also the part that is related to Alzheimer's disease, depression, dementia. So when the volume begins to shrink, many neurons begin to die. So we couldn't fight that. We could fight cholera. We could fight other infections by antibiotics or putting a stent in the heart when there's a block. But we couldn't fight the shrinking of the brain. But there's a hope. The bad news is, I don't know if you know anybody with Alzheimer's disease.
My dad passed away with bad Alzheimer's.
How difficult it is, right? The family invests heavily. So if you look at the Alzheimer's Disease Association in the US, about 11 million people from the household provided the healthcare without any salaries. They provide the free healthcare, like your father, right? By 2050, the US will face the largest labor shortage in the healthcare industry by taking care of patients with Alzheimer's disease or depression. 1/3 of all who die in the US today had dementia or Alzheimer's disease before their death. It's unavoidable because people are living longer. The brain started to shrink by after the age of 50. So that's the natural process. Now, there's a little bit of hope, which is brain, that hippocampus is one of the regions of the brain where you carry stem cells. And this was discovered only 10, 15 years ago. Because people thought that brain neurons never regenerate new neurons. So it's done once and for all. Except that little hippocampus. They carry the called neural stem cells. And stem cells are the cells that can become different kind of cells. So it turns out that if you exercise, even after the age of 65, and the exercise is very simple, walking 40 minutes a day, 3 times a week. How simple can it be? But it's a fast walking, not just slow walking. It's a fast. They're called brisk walking. If you walk 3 times a day, 40 minutes each time, they have taken hundreds of subjects. They did MRI every 6 months for those who are walking and those who are not walking. By the end of 1 year of walking, their hippocampal volume went down. So the rate of decrease was 1.5% volume per year. Their rate of increase was exactly 1.5% per year. So instead of keeping the brain volume the same, it actually became bigger.
So the sign got changed. Minus
So
1.5
changed.
to plus 1.5.
That's right. Plus 1.5. And their cognitive abilities significantly improved by about 5 times. And what is cognitive ability is like their ability to remember, their ability to make decisions. There are some standard tests, and they were way outperforming. They did the same tests for small children, like middle school, elementary school, grade 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, those kids who run, do exercise regularly, their ability to calculate, remember words, vocabulary, everything increased. So it's not only the old people like us, but it's good for the young children. With increasing digital devices, children are not playing as much. They're busy with texting and Facebook and YouTube. Their physical activity has been significantly reduced. And also, they have these PE classes, right? The physical exercise classes. Parents think that's not so good because it is a class that they just have to take it, so they just take it. But they have very little emphasis on it because they think it's not intellectual. It's not going to give them a grade that's going to take them to Harvard. So it has low priority. Those teachers have low priorities. But that has the longest impact. The studies are so well done, so well crafted with mice and rats and all kinds of studies. And you should see that regular exercise helps to increase the cognition, the brain volume at all ages. And increasingly, people are finding that they're also very good to prevent from occurrence of cancer. Or if you have cancer, delays the long-term negative impact. This is very promising because I talked about disparity, right? Rich people have more advanced healthcare than poor people. But exercise, walking 40 minutes a day, 3 times a week, anywhere is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I learned from somewhere, and then you can confirm that the muscle cells do not have a age counter. So at any age, if you exercise, muscle will grow. So I read a lot of junk. And then I started last year doing a bit more than I should do for my age. Yesterday, I ran 2 sets of stairs and I said, I haven't done this since I left high school. I see that a lot of additional flexibilities have come back, like a better word, because I put a lot of this. And now I even have a crazy target by end of the year. I don't know how I want to do muscle up and on a bar, which I failed to do as a teenager. So I want to do it. The point is that actually true that muscle really do not have any memory as such? If you put it in, it will grow.
One thing I should make clear is that muscle tissues carry stem cells. As we grow older, we constantly rely on stem cells because blood cells have to be replenished all the time. So the muscle tissues also carry stem cells. So when you are challenging the muscles, they are growing more muscles and then they're becoming more muscle tissue. So that's why when you bodybuild, at any age, if you do weightlifting and so on, you find out that your muscle has become stronger. No question about it. What is good, what is given is not only by exercising, you're making your muscles stronger, but the muscles are also giving something to the brain that is helping the hippocampus. So you're getting the double benefit. Your cognitive ability goes up while your muscle is also becoming stronger. It's a mind-body relationship that philosophers have thought for hundreds of years. Keep your body good, then your mind-body relationship.
Yeah, thank you for that, because maybe 5 years back before COVID, because all my activities are product of COVID, and I had a lot of time to think through, including leaving a full-time job because I used to travel quite. But the sort of reflection that I had was before, it was a psychological conditioning. Okay, I'm approaching 60. I should not be carrying loads. I have to be careful. This is like a point of gradually going down, because the more careful I am, less things I'm taking, capacity is going down as I'm using less and less. So then after listening to those things, and once I started exercising, I said, no, forget this age, just a
That's right.
number. So I'm now pushing every day. Can I take 10% more, 10% more? And I
Exactly.
find, like yesterday, one of my friend, I actually took something downstairs, a table and a glass top, which was quite heavy. Let me see, can I hold it for 5 minutes all the way to the lift, go down and put into their car? It was okay. Before I would not have touched. I'm old man, my back will hurt. Because
Yeah,
I challenge myself and I say, hey, I did that. That was very satisfying.
that's right. That's right. And really, there's no reason to think I'm old and I cannot do things. Like you said, you challenge a little bit. Of course, at any age, old or young, nobody should take the risk of tearing off the muscle.
Yes.
That is common sense.
You don't want to go to plastic limit like engineering.
Exactly. Nobody should conclude from our conversation that tomorrow I'm going to lift 100 pounds. At any age, caution is very important. You do as much as you feel safe because you're training your muscle, you're building up the muscle. But overstretching is always risky, right? No need for it. The science behind it is becoming very clear that this exercise, aerobic exercise particularly, like fast walking, they make your muscles stronger, and then they produce something which we don't know. People have few ideas, like one is called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, the muscle produces. Exercise is directly affecting your brain to get your aging slowed down. And what we find, without getting too much into technicalities, the question is what makes the brain become bigger, hippocampus become bigger. The only way, in a very commonsensical way, is that something is added. New mass is added, right? We engineers, we know that something has to be conserved to keep things conserved, but the volume goes, there is no other voids and pockets of air, which is not possible in the brain. The only way is if there are more neurons and other cells that make the brain, they begin to show up. And it turns out those stem cells, remember the stem cells we're talking about? When they get the signal from the muscle exercise, they get activated and they begin to produce new neurons. And that's how the hippocampal volume goes up at any age. So this is such a gift of life that it's the hippocampus which evolution prepared a long time ago. I need to put some stem cells there. Carry them until the end of your life. So it's not happening in the cortical part of the brain, it's in the hippocampal part of the brain. So they carry those stem cells, which take care of yourself. People find out ways to live longer and longer. If you exercise, those stem cells become new neurons. And what is more exciting is those neurons are like born again. Like when we were born, our brain was full of new neurons. So they're very fresh. They have no prior experience. They can collect words, remember things, right? So those new neurons that are being produced in the hippocampus, even after the age of 65, are fresh, born again. So that's why the cognition, remembering ability goes up. No, there's no reason to think, oh, I'm old, I have to retire. We used to say my one foot is in the grave. No, you have a lot more.
Yeah. Two names come in my mind. One, Warren Buffett retired at 94, right? He was working hard until that age, quite counting. And then what about this gentleman, Brian Johnston? Netflix has this series, The Don't Die. You know him, right?
I didn't follow the series much, but yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Measuring every body part and saying, okay, what's the age, biological age?
That's right. There's biological age and cognitive age. For those who might be more interested, if they ask the question, how exercise helps to make the brain, what we find is that in the brain, there are hippocampus, the neuron cells, who are main drivers of memory, learning, cognition, intelligence. But there's another group of cells called astrocytes. It turns out that when you're exercising, again, this is very preliminary evidence. We have not published this yet. When we exercise, the muscles become contractile, back to force. Astrocytes in the brain also become contractile, deep inside the brain. They produce something that makes the neurons become contractile. So it's like the contraction of the muscle during exercise, walking, running, jogging, whatever, is being transduced into the brain, and they're syncing the same forcing that's going on in the muscle. And that makes an environment, it's like the brain itself has gone into this exercising mode. And it's a physical, it's not chemical only. Of course, chemistry is there, but they become more contractile, and neurons become contractile, and their firing goes up. And so this transduction of mechanical force from muscle to the brain is the key for waking up the stem cells in the brain. So they are being told to wake up and produce the new neurons. So that's how the volume goes up. We did the same experiment.
It's similar to if you're in a bunch of army sleeping, suddenly you have an external attack, or you have to fight, right? You create a demand. Once you have the demand side ready, the supply side prepares to meet the demand. We do not put a demand on our bodies. Everything is useless, sitting there and slowly decays.
That's right. Yeah. Because it's very holistic and commonsensical. But there's a deep science behind it. We know only a little bit, not much, not to be found out. People knew empirically from observations that those who do exercise, they're better off. Only people are finding out over the last maybe 15 years that there's a deep biological reason why people remain more intellectually involved. Their dementia is pushed. Of course, exercise is one of many things. Good health, healthy eating, doing crossword puzzles, or doing mathematical thinking, or analytical thinking, they all help. Exercise is one of many things that the brain needs. And if it is not used, biology says, I don't need to be there. If we keep thinking about, oh, I'm retired, I'm old, my time is coming to an end, then you're in trouble.
The body will make sure that's what happens, right?
That's right. That's why I think the mind and body connection comes in. It's not philosophical. It's just deeply scientific.
If you are preparing that I'm not going to say everything, no challenge, why do I prepare? Why do I sharpen my things?
Then you are finished.
Now, Taher, this is fascinating, your journey from engineering. Everything at the end of the day, it's all engineering, all science. Different people use different track to ultimately get to where you are. What you tell a young person who said, I want to be like him, what should I do? Where do they start?
Just be prepared to accept any opportunity that comes and believe in it. Because one thing that often, including myself, we fall into this trap is, oh, what's the use of it? Somebody gives you an opportunity, and nah, I do something else. And a new opportunity comes, we say, what's the future? Why should I do this? And we quickly fall into this trap of what's in it for me, right away.
Yes.
The work that you have been doing for energy and environment for a long time, you don't get the result right away. You need to convince people, you need to change the technology, you need to change the lifestyle for greater humanity. But it's an opportunity. It was an opportunity for you and made an impact by saving significant amount of energy. So the opportunities are there. It's easy to shrug it off by saying, let me go for the next opportunity, or how can I be quickly rich? Take the win and then grab it.
And a lot more than that. I think in your case, what we just heard in the last 1 hour is basically not many people will dare, right? Just say, I've got a PhD in engineering. I know nothing about biology and I want to compete with cutting edge people talking about biology. I have no background. But you took the attitude saying, this is basic science. I'll learn as I go and I'll learn as much as I need to learn. So you can talk to one of the top neuroscientists or whatnot in similar terms because you learned whatever needed to be learned, right? Not
Correct.
being afraid, saying, sorry, I am coming with that X background. This is why. That's what
Yeah.
you hear most of the time. People say, listen, I am not an engineer. I'm just an economist. I'm an accountant or this and that.
Open mindedness and the fact that we know very little. That means we have room to learn, even if you're an engineer. And then if a different kind of engineer comes, let's say I do fluid mechanics and somebody comes from materials, solid mechanics with engineers, but I don't know, right? I know fluid mechanics only. I don't know solid mechanics. So I don't know materials. So we have to accept the fact that we don't know. And there's room to learn, right? If we feel like I'm the best in my field, then it blocks you. Opportunities will be missed. I think this humility of, I don't know, and I can learn from the others. And I think we all have superb mental abilities. It's just we don't use it. And we don't use it because we ourselves block from learning. Right? There is a famous quote by Rumi in a slightly different direction, but philosophical. And this quote is, don't look for love. Just remove the barriers. We could all be loved, but we put walls around us not to be loved. Knowledge is the same, right? We just think we know everything in little thing, little field. And this quest for knowledge, we all have the power. We just don't get it because we have put the barriers around us. So it's nothing about credit. It's about, like you said, the luck and the ability to take advantage of it. The only way you can do it is just having open mind to learn from the others. Others may say, oh, you don't know, you're stupid. So be it. We are all stupids.
I like that because this was the history behind my podcast. Two of my mentors said, do 5 a year, you study. And I said, listen, I'm one of those people. I don't have patience, but I'm persistent. I said, let me start. I'll figure it out. Once I've done 50, I've done 230. I'm doing okay. May not be the best, may not be optimum. I'm sure there are many critics, but I figured out something. There's some value that getting created. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect.
That's right. I just finished my class on last Tuesday. And I teach, this is an undergraduate class, 100 students. I teach about defects in materials. That's what makes different materials different types. And I tell them materials are not perfect because how do you make it becomes imperfect. And that's why plasticity, fracture, all these things happen. And I said, nobody's perfect. It's the imperfections of us that make our life stories. If we were all perfect, how boring life would be. We're all imperfect. That's what makes our life stories. So accept it.
And that's what makes us unique, right?
That's right. Yeah. We can imagine.
And that's what authenticity comes in.
Yeah, we give it a shot. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, you will find if one door is closed, there'll be a window. It'll open for you.
If you don't try, you don't make mistakes, then you don't progress.
And enjoy doing so. If you think positively, you don't get depressed. If it didn't work out, another time it will work out. But I've learned something by failing. The more we fail, the more we learn.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taher, for your time. Is there anything else you want to highlight?
No, thank you for giving the opportunity and things that you were doing for broader humanity. In fact, I was just talking to My wife, she knows you for a long time, and she probably follows you more than I do in terms of social media. She says, "Oh, Sohail bhai is doing so much for broader humanity."
We just try. I'm having fun.
But it's an impact, right? We cannot change the world overnight, but can we bring a little bit to others' lives? Justice is one, which is heavily compromised now. But at least whatever we can do, life a little bit easier, a little bit better.
Every
Giving
bit
some-
helps.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the other shows that are coming up.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. To continue listening to this conversation, please visit us at Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.